Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Asevana chabalana panditanan cha sevana puja cha pujaniyana etang mangalam uttamang patirupade savaso cha pube chakata punyata atta samma panidicca etang mangalam uttama bahusa chanshasi pancha vinayo chasusikito subhasita chayavacha etang mangalam uttama mata pitu upatana puttadara sasangaho anakula cakamanta etang mangalam uttama danan shadhammacariya shanyatakanan shasangaho anavajani kamma etang mangalam uttama arati virati papa majapana cha sanyamo apamado cha dhamme suetang mangalam uttama garavo cha nivato cha santuti chakatam yuta kalena dhamma savanang etang mangalam uttamang kanti cha sovacha sata samananan shadasana kalena dhamma sakacha etang mangalam uttamang tapocha brahmacharya Shariya sachanadasana nibbana sachikiriya shaetang mangalam uttama puttha saloka dhamme yasanakam patiya soka virajang kema etang mangalam uttama etadisanikatva nasabhata maparajita sabhata soting gacanti tante sa mangalam uttamanti yankin shivitang hidava urangva sage suvayang ratanang panitang nano sama atitathagathena idam pibude ratanang panitang etena sacena suvati hotu kayang viragang amatang panitang yada jaga sakya muni samahito natena dhammena samati kinshi idam pidamme ratanang panitang etena sacena suvati hotu yang buddha seto parivana สุจิงสัมมาดิมานันตาริกัญญาหุสัมมาดินาเทนะสัมโมนาวิจติอิดัมปิดัมเมรัตนังปานิตังเอเตนะสัจเจนะสุวัติโหตุเยปุกาลาอาตัสสะทังปัสสะตะชาตาริเอธานิยุกะนิหอนติเทดาคิเนยะสุกตาสัสสะวะกะเอเตสุดินนานิมหาปาลานิอิดัมปิสังเกรัตนังปานิตังเอเตนะสัจเจนะสุวัติโหตุเยสุปายุตตมานัสสะดัลเหนานิกามิโนโกตัสสะสานัมปิเทปาติปาตาอามาทังวิกายาลาดามุดานิบุติงบุญจามานะเอดัมปิสังเกรัตนังปานิตังเอเตนะสัจเจนะสุวัติโหตุขีนังปุรานังนาวังนาติสังบาวังวิราตชิตายติเกภวัสเมเทกินาบิจาอาวิรุลหิจันดานิมันติดีรายะตายังปาดิโปเอดัมปิสังเกรัตนังปานิตังเอเตนะสัจเจนะสุวัติโหตุการณิยมาตกุสะเลนะยันตังสันตังปะดังอภิสัมเมชะสาโกอุจุชัสสุหุจุชัสสุวัจโจชัสสะมุดุอนาติมานิสันตุสักโกชัสสุบาโรชัปปะกิโชชัสสะลาหุกะบุติสันตินเดรโยชันเนปะโกชัปปะกาโบคุเลสุอนันุกิโดนาชักกุดังสัมมาจาเรกินชิเยนาวินยุปาเรโยปะวะเดโยสุกิโนวะเกมิโนออนตุสัพเพสัตตาปะวันตุสุขิตาตาเยเกชิปะนาบุตาติทัสสะวะทาวาราวะอนาวัสเสสะดิฆาวะเยมหันตาวะมาเจมาราสกะอนุกัตุลาดิตาวะเยชาดิตาเยชาดุเรวาสันติอวิดุเรบุตาวาสัมปะเวสิวะสัพเพสัตตาภวันตุสุขิตาตานัปปะโรปารังนิกุเบตานาติมันเยตกะทักษินังคินชิบายาโรสนะปฏิกสัญญานัญญามัญญาสะดุกามิเชยมาตายตานิยังปุตังอายุสัพเอกปุตตมนุราเกเอวัมปิสาบาบุเตสุมานาสังบาวะเยอปาริมาณเมตัญ Satiriya Shasang Badang Avera Asapatang Titan Sharan Ova Sayanova Yavata Savigata Medo Etang Sating Aditeya Brahma Meta Viharangita Mahudi Tensha Anupagama Silava Dasanena Sampano Kame Suvineya Geda Nahi Jatu Gabaseya Punareti Tipeso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Veja Charana Sampano Sugato Lokavidu Anutaro Purisa Dhamma Sarati Sata Deva Manusana Pujo Bhagavati Savakato Bhagavata Dhammo Sanditiko Akaliko Ehipasiko Opanayiko Pachatang Veditabo Vinyuhiti Supatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Ujjapatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Nyayapatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Samikshipatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Yadidang Chattari Purisa Yuga Niyata Purisa Pugala Esa Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Ahuneyo Pahuneyo Dakineyo Anjali Karaniyo Anuttara Punya Ketang Lokasati Ati Me Saranang Anya Buddho Me Saranang Barak Etena Sachavajena Soti Te Hotu Sampada Nati Me Saranang Anya Dhammo Me Saranang Varam Etena Sachavajena Soti Te Hotu Sampada Nati Me Saranang Anya Sangho Me Saranang Varam Etena Sachavajena Soti Te Hotu Sampada. And now we will do the Quel's protection chant for Bodhinyana Monastery, Hermit's Hill, Jala Grove, NBM, Santi Monastery, and Metavanna, and maybe Albany, and maybe Kelmscott, and Dhammasara perhaps. So add those in there as well. Okay. Ati loke sila guno sachang soche anudaya tena sachena kaha misa chakiriya anutara avajitva Dhamma bala saritva pubake jine sa chambalang avasaya chakiriyang akasahang santipaka apatana santipada avanshana mata pita chanikanta jata veda patikama sahasache kate maiha mahapajalito siki vaje siso lasakarisa ni udakang patvayata siki sache name samonati esame sacha paramiti.
Cushions? One or two, Ajahn?
Two cushions.
Two? Yep.
Yeah, at least.
Sure.
The absolute minimum.
On the level of the absolute minimum? Okay. Someone do the microphone?
I can't have microphone.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, excellent. Evil. Whatever works, whatever is best. You can ask the master of the camera whatever he wants. He's the boss, the light master. Maybe we should take the candles out. That might be a good idea. Yeah. Is everyone okay with the temperature? Nobody's freezing here? Nobody's kind of in the sauna, too hot? No, everyone okay? Okay, in the kind of antarabhava, in between realm. Excellent. Okay, so here we go. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Okay, so we are going to have a look at the famous Brahmajala Sutta. This is the first sutta of the Digha Nikaya, the long discourses of the Buddha. And some people say it has been put there on purpose because it kind of makes a framework for the rest of the suttas. It kind of lays down the idea of right view, right view from a particular angle. And in that sense, it's kind of the beginning of the Noble Eightfold Path. The beginning of the practice starts with right view in the same way the Brahmajala Sutta is there at the very beginning of all the other suttas. So that is a nice theory, but in practice, I'm not sure if it really works, because if you go to the Chinese canon, the canon in Chinese translation, it has the Brahmajala Sutta as the 21st sutta. So it kind of destroys that theory a little bit. And of course, in the Chinese canon, the equivalent of the Digha Nikaya, the Dirgha Agama, is from the Dharmaguptaka school. So it's a different school, and that's why the sutta is in a different place. The the schools would all have the suttas in different places, sometimes in different nikayas, and that's what kind of makes it a bit complicated. And I should say that someone suggested this sutta, that's why I'm doing it. It's nice to have suggestions, and it's a long sutta. It's going to take us a long time. So for those of you who are keen on this sutta, come back, because it's going to take 5 or 6 times. So today is only once. So all those lay people, make sure you come back at the right time to hear the rest of this sutta, because this will be kind of bit hard, bit random to know actually when this is going to happen. So the word Brahmajala means Brahma's net, like a fishing net. Jala is a net. Brahma here has the sense of maybe supreme or primary or the best or the highest or something like that. So the kind of the best, the supreme net. And the idea, net as in a fishing net, right? So the idea is that you catch all these views with this net made by the Buddha, the Brahmajala, the net by the Buddha. You catch all these views, get rid of them, throw them out, and then the Dhamma is left behind. That's kind of the idea behind this title. And it was a title that was actually given to the sutta by the Buddha himself. At the very end of the sutta, we will see the Buddha kind of coming up with a few possible titles, Brahmajala being one of them, and that name has stuck. And there are a few suttas like that, where the Buddha actually gives the name at the end. That's kind of cool. The Buddha kind of, I guess that's part of the memory technique, to have a name. So it kind of makes it easy to remember what the sutta is about, and a name that is relevant to the content of the sutta, etc., etc. So before I go on to the sutta, I always like to look a little bit at parallel versions of the sutta. Are there many other versions, to find out if it is authentic or not? Sometimes there may not be any versions of the sutta apart from the Pali, and it kind of makes it, you can worry maybe it is not as authentic as you would like it to be. By authentic I mean it coming from the Buddha himself. And if it only exists in the Pali, you start to wonder. But if it exists across the board, there's a much greater chance that it is, authentic, going back to the very earliest times. And I thought I would show you a little bit about Sutta Central and what it looks like. Gee, that's not good. Okay. And so this is taken from Sutta Central. This is basically Bhante Sujato's website. This is what it looks like. And you can see all these little icons over here. They kind of have that tree means it's like an advanced sutta. If it's only a little sprout, it's a simple sutta. This is how it works. It's kind of cool. You see this icon here? You can listen to the suttas. All the suttas have been read in, so you can actually listen to every single sutta. I think both in Pali and in translation. I think you can listen in Pali. I never tried this before, but I think you can. And then, of course, you can share. I think this is for sharing or whatever. And then you have his translation here, the prime net. As usual, a little bit obscure with Bhante Sujato. He likes this kind of fancy translations. So the prime net, basically similar to the supreme net, I think. And then you have the Pali name, down here. You see that the Pali name, Brahmajala, and you have the reference number, DN1, and then you have a summary of the sutta. So this is the summary, and so I might as well read it out. While others may praise or criticize the Buddha, they tend to focus on trivial details. The Buddha presents an analysis of 62 kinds of wrong view, seeing through which one becomes detached from meaningless speculation here. So that is the summary. It's pretty good summary, I would say. And then you go down and you find all the, so here you have the different translations. You have 2 translations into English, one by Bhikkhu Sujato, another by Bhikkhu Bodhi. You can see the one by Ajahn Sujato, it has both English and Pali. So you get English and Pali side by side, or one line after the next one, which is really nice if you want to read it properly. And then you have translations into other modern languages, So there's 18 translations into other languages here, and everything is on Suta Central. So you can, whatever language you like, you can go in here. Bengali, this is for you, Venerable Sumita. Where are you? Special one for you, Bengali. Yeah? Bengali. You have already? Okay. Bhikkhu Sila Bhadra. Then you have Stepan Kromovsky. What language is that?
Czech.
The Czech, is it? Okay. Czechina is Czech. Okay, so that is Czech language. I check with the Czechs here. Then you have, this is a German translation you have here. Yeah, another German translation. Spanish, Hebrew, and this must be Hindi, is that right? Yeah, this is Hindi translation. Then you have Hungarian translation, Indonesian, this is for you, Venerable Ananda, Indonesian translation. Italian translation, any Italians here? No Italians, okay. Then we have the Burmese translation. You can see the Burmese characters are a bit, they are very kind of similar, aren't they? I wonder how you read that. They're all very, I think the software can't read the Burmese characters. I think that's the problem here. Then we have Norsk. Does anyone know which language that is? Norwegian, that's right, that's the Norwegian translation. Portuguese, yeah, this is Russian, is that right? Probably, yeah, Russian. Then we have Sinhala translation. This is for Anti-Sudama. This is for you, special one for you. Yeah, this is by A.P. de Zoysa in Sinhala translation. But yeah, but I think this one they say is easier to read. I think. They say this one is. Yeah, this one is. This is the Sinhala. Yeah, this is the Sinhala here. Then you have Thai. This is for Anti-Konkut. This is for you. Yeah, special one. Yeah, Siam Rat. Everything here. Yeah, this is amazing. That's astonishing. Then we have Vietnam. Any Vietnamese people here? Sumo. Where are you, Sumo? There you are. It's for Sumo. Yeah, for you. Then we have the last one is in Chinese. This is traditional characters. Is that right? This is traditional character Chinese. I don't know if anyone can read traditional character Chinese, but if you can, there it is for you. That's pretty amazing, isn't it? And there's more languages being added all the time. So you can read the suttas in your own language. Yeah? Pretty cool. Finnish is missing, by the way, Venerable Mudita. You're working on it? Okay, great. How far have you come? Not far. The first paragraph? Not the first. Thinking about it. Okay. So then we have the root text. The root text means the Pali. In this case, it means the Pali text, yeah? So this is the Mahasangiti Tipitaka Buddhavase 2500. This is a text that has been made in Thailand. It's based on the Maha Sanghayana version from Burma that was done in 1954, the Sixth Council. This is a kind of a further development on that one, very similar to that one. So basically Sixth Council edition. Then we have 26 parallels in ancient languages, yeah? And this is what I was really interested in, because this is the one which shows you whether we have anything in Chinese translation or Tibetan or Sanskrit or that sort of thing. Yeah. So the first one here is this is in Chinese translation. You can see here it says DA 21, and DA stands for Dirg Agama. Yeah, and 21 is the 21st sutta in the Dirg Agama, belonging to the Dharmaguptaka school of Buddhism, which was a translation done into ancient Chinese. So if you can read ancient Chinese, you can read this one. It takes quite specialized knowledge, apparently, to read ancient Chinese, but there it is. So this number here is the Taisho. A Taisho edition is the official. It's a edition done in Japan. So this is Taisho, Volume 1, page 88, column B, line 12 or something like that. This is how it works in columns, these kind of things. We have them actually in the library over here, so you can actually look it up in the library over there. I bought them when I was in Malaysia many years ago. I went to a specialist shop in KL. Do you know that shop, Venerable Radha? Specialist shop which sells suttas only. That's where I bought the agamas in Chinese. It's really a small little place, kind of tucked away. I had to climb up a couple of stores or and you had to find it in the back there somewhere. And when they saw me as a monk, they were really excited, and I thought that was quite cool, actually. And then we have here is another thing. This is called SHT, Sutta 16. SHT is what is it again? Sanskrit Schriften aus T is for Turfan, I think, which is a place in China where these suttas were discovered. They were buried in some cave, I think. Sanskrit Handschriften aus Turfan or something like that. And they were buried in a cave, and these are ancient Sanskrit fragments. They are maybe over 1,000 years old, 1,200, 1,300 years old. And they were discovered by a German team led by a famous German scholar called Ernst Waldschmidt, who uncovered these ones. And they were found there, I think, maybe in the 1920s, something like that. They were brought back to Germany, and then they have painstakingly been putting them together. Yeah, it's this incredible painstaking job. Just a vast collection of fragments, and they have to kind of put them together like some enormous jigsaw puzzle with millions of pieces in it. And this is from that. So this is a fragment of the sutta in ancient Sanskrit. And these are the references, for the various fragments you can see there. This is another version in Chinese, T21. This is an individual translation. It's not part of a collection. That's why it's called this T21. Then you have Up 3. This is a Tibetan translation. And so that is, Then there is the Mahasachaka Sutta. I have no idea why it's there. It's not supposed to be. There must be a mistake. And I have told Ajahn Sudatta off for having a mistake, but he hasn't responded yet. Then we have SF 41 and 48, and these are more fragments, of various fragments of various kinds, organized by another German scholar called Hartmann. And another version in Chinese, and this is from the Vinaya in Chinese. This T1500 is where the Vinaya is. This is a part of from Vinaya. And then there's lots more coming down here. And these are small fragments, Lots and lots and lots, you can see. This goes on and on and on and on and on and on. So we're not going to, I think that's enough, just to give you a little bit of idea. So what you can see there is that there are quite a lot of parallels to the sutta. There is about 4 or 5 full parallels in different languages. And so it means that it is quite likely to be a authentic ancient sutta. You find it there in the Dharmaguptaka, and I think some of those other schools, like the Sanskrit versions, are very often, they are Sarvastivadin, because the Sarvastivadins they wrote in Sanskrit. So it gives an idea of the span here of different suttas. So that is just to give you a feeling. I don't know if you are even remotely interested in this, but there you are anyway. Even if you are not interested, you got a chance to see it. So this is often the first question to ask. But there's another interesting thing about this particular sutta, and that is the fact that it is mentioned in other suttas. It is mentioned once in a sutta in the Chitta Samyutta, which is the 41st Samyutta of the Samyutta Nikaya. And I thought we could start off by having a quick look at that sutta, just to kind of give a bit of background. So this refers to the Brahmajala Sutta. It says, in the Brahmajala Sutta, the Buddha said this, And that is very interesting because it shows you how integrated the suttas are. And this happens in a few places. Sometimes you have the Dhammacakka being referred to in this way, which you would maybe expect. That is pretty much it. There isn't many of these references, but the Brahmajala and the Dhammacakka are two of those. And then there are some verses that are referred to, and the verses are then explained by the Buddha or by some monk what they actually mean. And those verses are from the Sutta Nipata. The last 2 chapters of the Sutta Nipata, called the chapter of 8, so the Attakavagga and the chapter on crossing over, the Parayanavagga, and that is where it's kind of quite cryptic verses, and they are then deciphered, if you like, or they are explained by the Buddha or some other monks. And this is interesting, that there is so much crossover in the suttas. It shows you that we are dealing with an integrated whole of the suttas. They all kind of come together in a certain way here. So I hope I'm making sense. Please, everyone, you are very free to ask questions at any time as we go through this. So if I'm starting to just not make any sense to you, then please feel free to ask questions at any time. So let's have a look at this particular sutta, which is being referred to. Here it is. And it is... Why is it not coming out properly here? There we are. Okay, that's better. Come line by line, next to each other. So, So this is a conversation between Chitta, the householder, and a monk. Yeah, and the question of Chitta asked this question, and he asked this question. This is the question: when what exists, do all these views come to be? Yes, we're going to talk about views, so this is perfect for this. When what does not exist, do all of these views come to be? Why are there all of these views, basically, right? What is it that causes these views to exist? And it's quite an interesting question, because this will illuminate quite a bit what these views are about, that we're going to talk about later on. What they, if you understand why they come about, it gives you an idea what these views actually concern, basically. And this is what he says, that he replies, householder, there are many different views that arise in the world. For example, the world is eternal, the world is not eternal, the finite or infinite, the soul and the body are the same, they are different. After death, the Tathagata exists, it does not exist, it both exists and doesn't exist, it neither exists nor does not exist. And these are the famous 10 unexplained questions. These are questions that are misconceived, and that's why the Buddha never actually answers these questions one way or the other. And then comes the interesting part that we want to look at, and also the 62 conceptions spoken of in the Supreme Net Discourse. These views come to be when identity view exists. When identity view does not exist, they do not come to be here. So the 62 views, this is the main content of the Brahmajala Sutta, the famous 62 views. And these 62 misconceptions, they arise because of identity view. And without identity view, they do not exist. Just by comment there, you can see here he calls it Supreme Net. The other time he calls it Prime Net. So he's not being entirely consistent here. Probably forgot to change it after he changed the other one. So now you can send an email to him and criticize him and say. So that is how they arise. So all of these things are rooted in the idea of identity view, the idea of that we exist in a certain way. We have a certain identity which kind of carries on and which exists in a certain way. And that tells us a lot about these views in the Brahmajala Sutta. It means that all of these views are somehow to do with our identity, with who we take ourselves to be. And almost always, identity in the suttas takes two forms. These views, either they have the form of eternalism, that you carry on forever in a certain way, like most religions in the world have this idea of eternalism, or they have the idea of annihilationism, that you get annihilated, you come to an end when you die. All of these things all of these views, they arise because of identity view. When there is no identity view, these views don't arise. So what do you have instead? Ding, 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 ding. What do you have instead? Any suggestions? Dependent anatta, yes, but it's also called dependent origination. That's what you have. So what you have is that things carry on as long as you crave. Stop craving, they come to an end. That's the middle way between eternalism and annihilationism. So that is that one reference to the Brahmajala Sutta that you find outside. And you can see the Buddha isn't really there, so quite likely this is a later sutta that arose at some time after the Buddha passed away here. So, whoops, that's really evil. Okay. Okay, so any comments so far? That is just a little bit by way of background. So now we can maybe start the sutta. So this is why these sutta readings take a while, because there's always a lot of extra things that is nice to take on board. So let's begin with this sutta. And this sutta starts in a very traditional way, and I have brought up here on purpose both the Pali and the English so that you have a chance to see the Pali together with the English. It's actually very nice to be able to do that, and we'll see how beneficial that is as we go along. Yeah. So I will read it out. This is Ajahn Sujato's translation. So I have heard. At one time, the Buddha was traveling along the road between Rajagaha and Nalanda, together with a large sangha of around 500 mendicants. So here we have the Buddha traveling between Rajagaha and Nalanda. And for those of you who have been to India, you will know why that is, because these cities are quite close to each other. They have all been excavated and all been found, and that's why he's kind of doing that. Very often in the suttas you will see the Buddha traveling, and you will see the route, so the cities are mentioned one after the other, and this is of course very helpful if you want to identify these cities in ancient India. There is a system by which you can help you to identify these ancient places. So he was traveling along this road, which he often would, with a large sangha, large group of around 500 mendicants. And here we have this translation, mendicants, which is used by Bhante Sujato, which is in some ways, I think, a very nice translation, because it gets to the idea of what a bhikkhu and bhikkhuni actually what they are. The English word mendicant is, the meaning of it is an alms mendicant, someone who lives on alms. And that is exactly the same meaning as bhikkhu. Bhikkhu also means one who lives on alms, and bhikkhuni, one who lives on alms. Yeah, so it actually is a very precise term for what we're talking about. The downside of mendicant is that it is old-fashioned and obscure. Yeah, a lot of people will not know what it means. But there's always a balancing act between these things. It can be very hard to find the right word. But it has, so like everything, it has downsides and it has upsides. The other advantage of mendicant is that it is gender neutral, so it includes both the bhikkhus and bhikkhunis. And very often when the Buddha gave discourses, there would have been bhikkhunis present. Yeah, they're never mentioned. The bhikkhus are always mentioned. And the reason for that is simply because of the seniority. There would often have been lay people present as well. They are also never mentioned. So this is one of the great reasons for using the word mendicant here. But I'm already getting ahead of myself because I haven't talked about so I have heard. Yeah, this very beginning here, the start point of the sutta. Evang me sutang, as you see over here. These very famous words. Yeah, and please behave. Okay. So evang me sutang. And what are these words? And this is quite interesting. Evang means thus, me is like by me, and sutang is heard. So thus by me heard, yeah, thus have I heard, or so have I heard. And these are very, very famous words. And traditionally, if you read the commentaries of the suttas, they will say that what these words mean, this is the words used by Venerable Ananda at the first council when he was reciting the suttas. That's what the commentaries say. Yeah, and the question is that really so? Is that true? That actually these are the words of Ananda from the first council? And the answer probably is no. That is not what they actually mean. What these words actually are, they are a marker of the oral nature of the suttas, and what they mean is that this is what I have received from the previous generation of reciters, and has been passed on from reciter to reciter. Yeah, this is what I have heard because I've heard it from before. So this is something that would have been added to the suttas after some time. Yeah, this is kind of why that is there. And we know that for a number of reasons, and one of the reasons we know that is that when in the suttas, when they talk about being in the presence of the Buddha and learning the suttas, they use a very different term. They use samukkame bhagavata gahitang, something like that, gahitang, samukkame suttang. Yeah, samukka is the word which means in the presence of. So, for example, when in the Vinaya, when you have the 7 ways of dealing with issues, the Sattadikarana Sammata Dhammas, when we deal with those, one of those is Samukha Vinayo, is resolving something by the presence of the people. And this is the word that we're using here. So there is already a word for that in the suttas. And this here has a different meaning. It refers to the oral transmission of the suttas. And this is, I think, it's quite an important point because it means that when we know that we're dealing with an oral literature and we know that it has been passed down through many generations and we can be almost absolutely sure that because it has been passed down through many generations, there will be mistakes. And the Buddha says that. It says in the sutta specifically that when something, actually it says that in the Kalama Sutta, the Kalama Sutta says that a tradition that you receive can either be right or be wrong. And of course, that is true also for the suttas. It is true for all traditions, not only for other traditions, but also for the suttas. And this is a reminder that we need to be careful, we need to be circumspect, and we need to actually look at the suttas through comparative studies and all of these kind of things to make sure that we are dealing with authentic scriptures. So this is the first point that comes out of this. The second point, and this is a point, is actually I should have brought that up here as well, and that is when you read about the first council. The first council supposed to happen about 3 months after the Buddha passed away. In that council, Venerable Mahakassapa, who was the leader of the council, he asks Venerable Ananda, he asked him, where was the sutta spoken? Who spoke the sutta, or who was there with the Buddha? He asked for this kind of information. Now, if you now read the suttas, you will see, like you see here, it says, at one time the Buddha was traveling between Rajagaha and Nalanda. Now you see that. Now that has been incorporated in the sutta, but originally it would not have been incorporated because otherwise Mahakassapa wouldn't ask about those details at the first council. So the first council shows us that a lot of the detail about who was present, where the sutta happened, and all of these kind of things was added later on. Otherwise, if it was already part of the sutta, then Mahakassapa wouldn't ask about those things. And that shows you, again, the idea that if you want to look at what is the word of the Buddha in a more focused way, it is what is the quote, what is actually the Buddha is talking, what the Buddha is saying. That is really the essence of what the suttas are. And that would have formed the original core of the suttas. And then they were expanded by extra material after a while. And so that, again, helps us to kind of differentiate what is the essential message of the suttas, what we should focus on as crucial, and then it kind of helps us narrow down these things. And this is actually surprisingly useful because you will actually find that a lot of strange things appear in this narrative material. We call this the narrative material because it's like the background story, it's like the narrative, lot of strange things are found in there, like lots that if you look for miracles, for example, that's usually where you find the miracles. That's where you find the strange things. And this is kind of a tendency in the suttas that as time goes by, the more miracles you have, the more people will focus on not the Buddha as a Dhamma teacher who takes you to the end of the suffering, but as the Buddha as some kind of supernatural phenomenon. It becomes more and more of that as you go along here. So these are some of the things that you see in here straight away, just by understanding these suttas in the right ways. Little things like Evang me sutang actually is quite interesting here. I should let you know that a lot of this information is found in 2 essays written by Venerable Analayo, written on this particular sutta, and he discusses Evang me sutang and Ekang samayang at quite a lot of length. And he discusses whether Evang me sutang and Ekang samayang should be understood as one phrase or 2 phrases, for example, and this kind of stuff. Is it interesting? I guess it depends on the person, but some of you might find it interesting here. So, Venerable Mudita.
What about the header? Was that included first straight away, or
Which header?
Like what we call the sutta?
Well, that I think varies enormously, but in this particular case, the Buddha actually gave a name to the sutta at the end. but in a number of suttas there would be no name, and then the monks, or the tradition would come up with names, and sometimes those names are very, very different. For example, in the Pali tradition compared to the Chinese translation, so that is much more variable. So it depends, But most of the time not. They wouldn't have had a name originally.
And the naming, do you have any idea when the name came?
Probably would have just throughout history, people were given them names. One of the places the names come from is that almost all the suttas, they have an udana, which is like a mnemonic verse. It's like a memory verse, that you have at the end, and it kind of lists all the suttas. And that list is usually, that becomes then the name for the sutta later on, because it has one word which kind of tells you which sutta it was. And that happens very frequently in like the Anguttara Nikaya, lots of short discourses. You just take that word and whack it into the heading instead. So they use that kind of techniques. Okay, so the Buddha is traveling between Rajagaha and Nalanda with a large sangha of about 500 mendicants. So what happens next? Ding, 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 ding. Exciting. So let's see. This is what happens next. The wanderer Suppiya was also traveling along that same road together with his pupil, the Brahmin student Brahmadatta. Brahmadatta literally means given by Brahma. Datta is the past participle meaning given. So he was given by Brahma. So he was a Brahmin student. So these would have been wanderers, Brahmin wanderers. They would be part of the Brahmanical tradition, but they were also ascetics in a certain way. So they were wandering along the same road. So now this gets exciting. We're going to see the Buddhists versus the Brahmins and see who wins in this. Meanwhile, Suppiya criticized the Buddha, the teaching, and the Sangha in many ways, while his pupil Brahmadatta praised them in many ways. So you have this teacher and student, and one of them, the teacher is criticizing the Buddha and the Dhamma Sangha, and the student is praising them. So this is quite, this is quite interesting in its own right. This is quite a kind of common thing, I think, in the world, whereby the teacher, he holds on to the orthodoxy. The orthodoxy is that position that was probably his teaching, so he has to criticize all other teachings. But the student is probably more open-minded, more interesting, listening maybe to other possibilities. And this is very kind of common across the world. And I remember one of the things that Bhante Sujata said a long time ago, which I thought was quite a wise thing. He said that every generation of Buddhists have to kind of rethink the Dhamma in their own way, because every generation is going to have a slightly different outlook. Every generation is going to be a slightly different culture. It's going to be a slightly different time. And so you have to make the Dhamma applicable to that generation. So, and this is kind of how we keep the Dhamma relevant in the world, by kind of upgrading it a bit and applying it to new modern problems and all of these kind of things. So there's always going to be a little bit of clash, perhaps, between students and pupils. And I think it's important that we allow the Dhamma to evolve in that way, that we're not too conservative, trying to desperately to hold on to things. I think the more we hold on, the more we tend to destroy the Dhamma. We have to allow evolution. And this is why in Australia we have to do things in a slightly Aussie way. That's just the way it has to be. Otherwise, we can't relate the Dhamma to Australian society. And if it goes to Norway, you have to take out the suttas about snow, and cold, and the same thing in Finland, and Switzerland maybe as well. And so you have to somehow keep it alive in this way. And I think this is a very significant thing, that we don't cling on to the Dhamma in a silly way. And of course, a very important point here is to know which aspects that you can upgrade and which aspects you can't. This is actually one of those kind of critical things to understand. And that distinction is what every generation has to be wise enough to understand what can be adapted and what cannot be adapted. And of course, the general principle is that the core aspects of Buddhist doctrine you cannot change. But what you can change are the superficial things, how you speak it, how you deliver it, how many jokes you use in your Dhamma discourse, that kind of stuff, yeah? And how maybe you wear your robes, whether you wear your robes like Venerable Sunyo, or whether you wear robes just like everyone else here. Venerable Sunyo is Venerable Sunyo is the rebel, is the Bodhinyana rebel when it comes to robes, yeah? So he's kind of taking it into the, I guess, the Dutch direction, yeah? This is the Dutch future of Buddhism.
Orange robes.
Why is that?
Because
Holland.
Dutch color.
That's a Dutch color. Ah, okay, so that's good. So we can expect to see an orange robe soon, in other words. So let's look out for the orange robe. Yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to use the opportunity to show that this kind of tension between teacher and pupil actually is something that we should look at in Buddhism as well. And we shouldn't be too afraid, yeah, of sometimes challenging the way things have been done, because we need to be on our toes. Our job is to get the Dhamma, practice the Dhamma first of all, and then to make the Dhamma accessible to the world. That's our job. And the right way to do that is to be a little bit adaptable, not to be afraid and to be kind of conservative in a kind of crazy, in an over-the-top way where you're just clinging on, basically. Anyway, enough of that. And let's carry on. And so both teacher and pupil followed behind the Buddha and the Sangha of mendicants, directly contradicting each other. Then the Buddha took up residence for the night in the royal rest house at Ambalatika, together with the Sangha of mendicants. This is a place called Ambalatika, and there's this whole sutta called the Ambalatika Rahulovada Sutta, which is one of the suttas on the Majjhima Nikaya, which takes place there. And Suppiya and Brahmadatta did likewise, yeah? And there too, Suppiya criticized the Buddha, the teaching, and the Sangha in many ways. Yeah, he had a lot to say, the Suppiya. But his pupil Brahmadatta praised them in many ways. And so both teacher and pupil kept on directly contradicting each other. Then several mendicants rose at the crack of dawn and sat down in the pavilion, where the topic of evaluation came up. Topic of evaluation. Okay. It is incredible, Reverence. It is amazing how the diverse attitudes of sentient beings have been clearly comprehended by the Blessed One who knows and sees, the perfected one, the fully awakened Buddha. For this Suppiya criticizes the Buddha, the teaching, and the Sangha in many ways, while his pupil Brahmadatta praises them in many ways. So this is a bit strange, isn't it? So you say how amazing and how incredible it is how the Buddha has seen the different attitudes he has here. Another word would be inclinations, yeah, of sentient beings, or something like that. And they praise the Buddha because he has seen the different attitudes and relating this to these wanderers. It's a little bit kind of over the top. I don't know if the Buddha deserves praise just because these wanderers are contradicting each other, but that's kind of what's going on here. And sometimes the suttas are a little bit like that. You feel that the kind of praise is a little bit out of kilter with what actually is going on. But anyway, that is what is happening. The point, of course, is that the Buddha is supposed to be able to see the inclination of beings. Yeah, if he turns his mind to that, I think that's kind of the point. So it's just adding a bit of praise of the Buddha, I suppose, just for good measure, to make sure we don't forget about the qualities of the Buddha, something like that. And so just saying the same thing again. It's a little bit too large, isn't it? I take it down a bit. It's just too hard to read sometimes. Yeah. So. Yeah. And when the Buddha found out about this discussion on evaluation among the mendicants, he went to the pavilion where he sat down on the seat spread out and addressed the mendicants. Mendicants, what were you talking about just now? What conversation was left unfinished? This is quite common also in the suttas. You see this in a number of places. The Buddha sees that the monks are having a discussion, or maybe the nuns, and then he comes and he sits down and says, "What are you discussing?" Yeah, And of course, if you go to the commentary, what does the commentary says? The commentary says that the Buddha knew that they were discussing this already, but he just says this, yeah, just out of politeness or something like that, but he already knew. And if you go to the Dharmaguptaka version of the sutta that I was talking about before in the Dirghagama, there, this idea of the Buddha knowing is actually found in the sutta itself. Yeah? It specifically says that the Buddha knew that the monks were already saying these things, whereas in the Pali, that's found its way in the commentary. And that is another interesting thing that is worthwhile commenting on. Is that sometimes what happens in the suttas is that when you take two parallel suttas, one in the Pali, say, and one in the Chinese, yeah, very often there will be small little things like this. This is just like two words or whatever that are found in one, but not found in the other. And quite commonly, that thing which is found in the Chinese translation, but not found in the Pali, will then very often be found in the Pali commentary, yeah? At other times, there will be things in the Pali which are not found in the Chinese translation. And quite likely that would have, we don't have many commentaries in the Chinese, but quite likely that would have then been found maybe in the commentary of the Chinese. And this is fascinating because it shows you one of the problems with oral tradition. One of the problems with oral tradition is that when you recite the suttas, and very often you will also have to recite the commentaries along with the sutta, yeah, because they belong together, because the commentary explains the content. But when you recite them together, it can be very hard to keep them apart. What is actually sutta? What is commentary? And sometimes material from the commentary seems to have made its way into the sutta. Yeah? And for that reason, yeah, you get things like this, where you know, the knowing is there in the commentary in one, but in the sutta in the other. And this is not very common, but a fairly common thing. It happens in one other place in this particular sutta, which we'll see this afterwards, where it happens really big time, yeah, really, really big time. And so you will see what I mean by this when I talk about this. But this is an interesting phenomenon, and it's worthwhile thinking about, because sometimes there will be little things like that which may seem odd, yeah, and they may be odd for a reason, because they actually have made their way into the sutta in this way. And again, the Venerable Anala, who is the #1 researcher on comparative study, he has shown this to be the case in a number of places, yeah, and the argument is quite convincing and quite strong here when you look at it, and you kind of, I think, appreciate that he is onto something when you see that. Anyway, so the Buddha comes, yeah, and it's quite nice. They're having a discussion, and the Buddha comes along, yeah, oh, what are you talking about? Yeah, and then, of course, he will then carry on the discussion, yeah, with the monks and maybe the nuns and maybe the lay people, whoever is there. Yeah. So what is that conversation? And the mendicant told him what had happened. Yeah, and this is all the Pali here is saying everything again, but he has made it much shorter, adding, "This was our conversation that was unfinished when the Buddha, when the Blessed One, arrived." And then the Buddha replies, "Mendicants, if others criticize me, the teaching, or the Sangha, don't make yourself resentful, bitter, and exasperated. You will get angry and upset, which would be an obstacle for you alone. If others were to criticize me, the teaching, or the Sangha, and you would get angry and upset, would you be able to understand whether they spoke well or poorly? No, sir." So this is already quite interesting. Yeah, this is about how to react when someone criticizes, I guess, us. Yeah, criticizes you, or criticizes the Dhamma, criticizes Ajahn Brahmali, or criticizes rebirth, or anything that has to do with the life that we are living. Dhamma is just rubbish. Yeah, and then how do you react to that? And this is the right way to react. And of course, the first point is that if we get upset, who is that an obstacle for? Well, it's an obstacle for each one of us. Yeah, if you get upset because someone challenges you about rebirth, or if you get upset because someone says, "Oh, Ajahn Brahma, I really don't like Ajahn Brahma. He tells too many jokes. Yeah, I don't want to hear all those jokes." And you just have to shrug your shoulders, because that is Ajahn Brahm's teaching style, and it is actually very, in my opinion, it's a very great teaching style, to be honest. But some people don't like it. What do you expect? There's always going to be some people who don't like what someone teaches. Yeah, you have to expect that. So if someone challenges Ajahn Brahm, don't get upset about it. Shrug your shoulders. Okay, whatever. That's your opinion. You have the right to that opinion. If we get angry about things, it only has a negative effect on ourselves. It's a very nice thing to think about it. Why get angry? It never really helps in any way whatsoever. This is the first one. And in a way, it's far wiser to feel a bit sorry for the person. Yeah, I mean, or have a bit of compassion for them. Criticizing Ajahn Brahm, I wouldn't recommend it for a small thing like that. Maybe if he did something really nasty, then you might criticize him, but not for all the trivialities that you get criticized for sometimes. It's really stupid. So never get angry with other people. It really doesn't make any sense. If they are wrong, they have made a mistake, then have compassion for them. And if you get angry, very often what it shows your own uncertainty, your own kind of lack of confidence in what you're doing. So that is really, really what you should focus on then instead, probably. And then you have this other idea that if you get angry and upset, you can no longer evaluate if their critique is right. Yeah? If someone criticizes you when you give a Dhamma talk, if someone says to you, "Yeah, you're going too slowly on the Brahmajala Sutta. Yeah, you should go faster. I'm not interested in all of these kind of small things. I want to get to the core of things. Get on with it." Yeah. So do I get angry, or do I say, "Yeah, actually, maybe you have a point, Maybe you have a point. I have to admit, I'm going pretty slowly now." So it might be a valid criticism, yeah, from a certain point of view. But it might also, it really depends on how you look at it. But the point is that if you get angry and upset, you can no longer evaluate things in the right way. And that is such an important point. And so I would say, even if you are going to look at yourself, never get angry with yourself. We all make mistakes. What do you do when you make a mistake? Do you get angry with yourself? Do you think, "Oh no, wow, that's really terrible"? Don't get angry with yourself. Instead of getting angry, just look at yourself and say, "Well, what happened? How did this come about?" And if you don't get angry and you look at yourself with neutral eyes, then you can have some sort of insight into your character flaw, and maybe you can find a solution. But the moment you get angry, the moment you try to push it away, the moment you have too much desire to get rid of it, you can't see clearly anymore. You don't really know what's going on. And actually, you tend to perpetuate the problem if you get angry with yourself. So never get angry. Be cool. Okay, I made this mistake. Everyone makes a mistake. It's okay. Now, why did it happen, right? And then you are cool about it. Then you find the solution. And this is always a far superior way of dealing with your own problems. So please be kind to yourself, yeah? We all think that we are sometimes the worst, we make the worst kind of problems. And sometimes I think that about myself, but I realize probably not. Yeah, there are probably monks that are worse than me in this world, so I'm probably okay. And then you can kind of accept yourself for the little mistakes that you make. So it's a very good, teaching, the idea of not getting angry and upset. And of course, what comes out of this, is also the idea that if someone does criticize the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha, if they do that, actually the right approach is to listen and to find out whether there was a point to it or not. Yeah. So this is what the Buddha then says: if others criticize me, the teaching, or the Sangha, you should explain that what is untrue is in fact untrue. This is why that is untrue. This is why that is false. There is no such thing in us. It is not found among us. And of course, the opposite is also true. If someone criticizes you and they happen to be right, we have to be honest about that. There's no point in hiding sticking your head in the sand and pretending there is no problem. In fact, one of my little verses in the Dhammapada, where the Buddha points out, he says that if you if someone ever points out a flaw in you, you should see it as someone revealing a treasure for you. Yeah, it is such a beautiful idea, because sometimes we are blind to our own flaws. We cannot see what's going on with ourselves, which is very natural. So if someone actually can point something out to you, and you can see that, wow, we should probably bow down to that person, yeah, and say, thank you for pointing this out to me. Yeah. And because it actually helps us to move forward on the path, and the whole purpose of this life is to move forward on the path. So they have actually been a great service to us. So it can be useful, yeah, sometimes to get criticized. We shouldn't be too defensive about criticism. We should be open to things, at least occasionally. Of course, if the other person is coming from anger and ill will, it's much more difficult to take them seriously. But if they come with a good heart and trying to be sincerely helpful, then I think it's very useful to have an open mind about things. And then you have the other side of the coin. If other people praise me, the teaching or the Sangha, don't make yourself thrilled, elated and excited. Yay, the Buddha is the best. Whoa, we are the best. Yeah? Don't do that. Why? Because that also would be an obstacle for you. Yeah? When you get excited about some kind of superficial thing, you get excited from external praise, usually there's always a downside coming afterwards, someone then criticizing you, yeah? And if they have praised you beforehand, you get excited about it, it gets much worse afterwards if you then lose it afterwards. And it is nothing to be praised, nothing to be too thrilled about. Instead, if others praise me, the teaching or the Sangha, you should acknowledge that what is true is in fact true. This is why that is true. This is why that is correct. There is such a thing in us. It is found among us. So this is how you deal with praise, yeah? Yeah, okay, that's found in us, okay. Yeah. And then you can feel, I suppose it's a sense of satisfaction, yeah? That these things actually are there, and you don't have to worry too much about it. It's a very kind of matter-of-fact way of dealing with praise and blame, and very sort of the way the Buddha tends to do things. So quite nice. Okay, so that is the introduction to the sutta, yeah. And I think this is a very good place to stop. I had thought of getting a bit further than this, but this is usually what happens. You don't get that far. Are there any last comments or questions on what we have done so far? Does anyone think we're going too slowly? No? No one dares to criticize. Okay, good. Okay. Nothing? No one wants anything? Okay, great. So let's call it a day then. Sadhu, 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 anumodami. Arahang Sama Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantam Abhivademi Svakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho